Says here, there's a practical way to better memory. But is that really true? I don't think so. And today, I'm going to tell you why and what you really need to do to have better memory that lasts. And just so you know you're in the right place, you might be a student who values the ability to recall new information, which is so essential to learning. It's so impactful on your critical thinking. And the better memory that I'm going to share with you today, the path that you follow, is going to streamline your studying for better test performance. And if you're a business professional who'd like to quickly master the names of your associates, never forget the details in meetings, be able to memorize the most current statistics that will lead you to more effective and productive business conversations, well, you're in for a treat. Or maybe you're a healthy senior who wants to assuage the frustration of what is actually normal age-related senior moments and other forgetfulness with better brain function. But you might be wondering, is it really possible, especially when people use this word practical? Well, you probably know fellow students, colleagues, family members who effortlessly remember things like historical facts, names, birth dates, or phone numbers. And you're amazed at the ability of other people to just absorb this stuff and keep it, including the details of previous conversations. Maybe they can recite scripture. Maybe they're even just better at learning entire new languages. And you feel left behind, and you don't know why. Well, part of the problem might be that you're chasing after practical memory tips instead of the memory path that actually works, right? So your friends probably don't have special powers that you don't. And the advantages they have may be hidden from you. The reality is that there are no magic superpowers. There are certainly no magic beans, and there are definitely no magic bullets. But there are some lifestyle hacks that can help you and help you keep up, or at least get in the game of remembering, as well as people who seem to have this natural memory advantage. And we're going to take a look not only at what to do and how to do it, but I'm going to share some of the scientific research that helps us improve the tips that I've got for you, make them even better so that your memory will be stronger than ever before. Spoiler alert, however, memory help is on the way, and this is Dr. Anthony Metivier from magneticmemorymethod.com. But because this is me, I'm going to ask you to start the process of improving your memory right now by taking notes so that you never have to review this video again. You want better memory? One of the best things that you can do is save time by capturing the information that people share with you. And one of the best tools that you can use to capture information is the index card. You might laugh. Hey man, isn't this the 21st century? Shouldn't I be able to just take notes in any old way that I like with my digital tools and blah, 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 blah that I hear from people all the time? No. The digital tools, they help some people, it's true. But for most of us, we need to get our hands involved, and we also need spatial memory benefits that come from physical objects in the world. So if you really want to improve your memory, every single tip that I'm going to share with you today matters, and you want to make sure that you remember those tips, and you want to do it in such a way that you make it your own by taking notes and translating it into a plan that you craft for yourself. So, can you really improve your memory? I don't know, but the journey starts by taking personal responsibility and not allowing yourself to forget and sticking with the program from beginning to end. And as I often ask my coaching clients, the number one place to start, and write this down. What do you mean by memory improvement? Aside from individuals with cognitive diseases or memory disorders, we all need to get curious about what we mean by memory and what it is that we want to process better. Because the exact way that we'll use the memory techniques that we talk about later for easier recall really come down to what the information is and the nature of the goal. That dictates so much. And we know this from decades of student anecdotal reports of what they did and how they did it to accomplish goals, my own anecdotal reports included. But we also know it from external sources, like science, from decades of memory competition records. We know it from thousands of years of people teaching memory techniques and so forth. But it's not just about memory techniques, and you can't make it only about memory techniques, even though we'll spend a little bit of time on that in this masterclass tutorial on how to improve your memory. If you want short-term and long-term memory retention, you need to attend to every single detail, because these things go hand in hand with brain function and memory. Stronger psychological, emotional, and spiritual health boosts await for you, but you need to take a comprehensive approach to everything we're going to talk about today to steer both your body and your mind to better memory. So before we get started, one last thing. I want you to know there's no single magic elixir for improving memory. It really is about the holistic, comprehensive miracle of getting things together in the most robust way. Not this practical way. It is, in fact, a little impractical. I took on that impracticality myself, and I have been so happy for it ever since. Don't worry, it gets easier and easier and easier as you work on checking all the boxes that we're going to talk about today, but all those boxes do need to be checked if you want the absolute best, most shining memory you can possibly have, and the gloriousness of the consciousness that it can produce, the awareness, the focus, the concentration. So with all that in mind, holistic memory improvement, even if it's impractical, I got 18 memory improvement tips for you. And you don't have to do everything all at once. Incorporate everything as you go, and make sure you explore everything, and make sure you get it down on your cards so you never have to go through this again. And you can put those cards up on a board in your house so you never forget, and use a memory journal, writing out your plan and your schedule to start incorporating all of this, because the memory techniques that I also share with you are going to work so much better for you. All right, so let's get into it. The first thing is to get moving for your memory. We all know, everybody knows this, physical fitness is so important to maintaining a healthy lifestyle. But even mild physical exercise benefits your memory. There's a 2018 imaging study of the brain that showed healthy young adults with hippocampal dependent memory, which means their memory processing improvements, went into a boost state immediately after 10 minutes of very light exercise. And this is comparable to just walking at a slow pace, making sure you walk every day. Now, here's a little additional tip for you from some additional research about walking and memory. I do this about 3 times a week for about 10 minutes each session. Walk backwards. This is known to improve your memory, and it's also apparently quite good for your knees. But walking backwards is a neurobic activity, and it really changes things up. It causes your brain to suddenly work in a different way. Why exactly it improves memory, I don't think the research knows. We just know that people who are tested for walking backward, they have better recall. And I've noticed it myself. At first, I didn't believe it. I was a little bit skeptical. But I did it, and I just thought, wow, I actually do feel like my memory is better. So this is an amazing thing that reading scientific research can do for you. It gives you clues what to do. And there are brain chemical researchers that have learned that higher levels of what's called BDNF, or brain-derived neurotropic factor, this is a protein, and it's correlated with improved cognitive performance. And they think this is due to the protein's strong supportive role in encoding long-term memories in our brains. Isn't that so exciting that you could literally just increase through exercise a particular part of your brain so that your brain is stronger? And there's animal studies that show higher levels of BDNF, for example, in rodents. When they exercise, they just have much better memories. And so with human research, with animal research, we know that we need to have physical exercise. And doctors often give physical exercise in neurotherapy programs to help people get their cognitive health back and to get their memory back. And there's ancillary benefits of aerobic exercise. We're talking about weight loss. You have to eat a better diet as well, but it'll help with weight loss. You get to promote better sleep when you exercise regularly. You get an elevated mood, right? And the thing about elevated mood is I'm often in a bad mood, and I go to the gym, and within 15 minutes, I feel a lot better. Because I feel better, I can focus and concentrate better on the glory of the world around me. I catch details much better, and then I remember them better. So it's just a win-win across the board. It's memory boosting, and it gives you reasons to put those shoes on, get out the door, and at least go for a walk. Now, the second tip is related to physical exercise, and it's very specifically about strength-resistant training. And you might look at my pipes and be like, man, you don't look that strong. You don't have to do that much. Findings from a Georgia Tech research study indicate that even just a short session of resistance training can enhance your episodic memory very specifically, which is a kind of long-term memory for the events in the past. And so this reminds me that I actually have a video of myself doing weighted pull-ups. So I might not have the biggest pipes in the world, but before I hurt my shoulder, I was able to actually lift myself plus additional weight. And I still do, basically, I guess you call them Australian pull-ups or Australian chin-ups. Not as good as it used to be, but it still has that effect. So really, we just get back to BDNF, and you get more of it when you do some resistance training, and then you get better memory results. So it's just a win-win. And strength and resistance training improves so much more. It increases your physical health in so many different ways. I mean, one thing I also notice is better posture, because I do a lot of sit-ups and stuff like that, and it just makes me stand taller, which is good for reducing some of that shoulder problem that I talk about. Haven't totally fixed the shoulder, but just having a better posture means that I have fewer incidences of shoulder pain. And there's lots and lots of studies. I've seen one study that has 78 benefits of strength training, specifically for seniors in this particular case, and they showed improved mental health and cognitive functioning, which takes along with it memory improvement. There's also studies that have shown senior women realize powerful cognitive improvements when they have long-term resistance training over multiple types of physical activity. So we're talking not just your arms, but squats, every major muscle group. Very, very important. Now, along with this is maintaining a healthy weight. So this is the third tip. And you might not think of it every day, but your weight has an impact on your memory. Being overweight is linked to concentration, to memory being challenged, but also being underweight is linked to challenges as well. In fact, if you're underweight, you can have a difficult time with flexible thinking, with decision making, and it comes from concentration issues. So body mass index, or BMI, it's a classification that helps us understand the relationship between body weight to our height, and it provides a nice reference to determine if your body weight is healthy for your height. And again, it's not just about being overweight. Underweight people can also have a low BMI. I know, I've been there, and it's just something to attend to. And I wound up adding more fats to get my body weight up a little bit more, and it helped. Watch out, though, specifically for obesity because of the systematic inflammation, which is suspected to be a huge part of cognitive decline. There was a 2017 University of Arizona study, and it had a relationship between high body mass index and the presence of C-reactive protein, or CRP, being in the blood. And having that high rate led to a much faster decline in brain function over time. So that's really, really important to do whatever it takes to get your body weight in order. Back to being underweight, you've got possible conditions like anemia, low hemoglobin. All of these things are linked to MCI, which is mild cognitive impairment. And I don't want that, right? There's a 15-year study that suggested middle-aged or older patients with this low BMI, they have an increased risk of dementia. I'm very, very worried about that. So, what you can do is get a BMI calculator, get an idea of your weight status, and if your BMI indicates it, go to your doctor for advice on steps that you can take to get your body ratio into a healthier range. Your memory will thank you for it. Number 4 is sleep. Oh, there's nothing like a good sleep. And right now we have a situation where we're not getting good sleep at all. And it does very, very bad things to energy, to the mind. And sometimes I stumble a little bit over these long form poems that I've memorized or mantras in Sanskrit. And it's coming from having my sleep disrupted. Just one sleepless 24-hour period is the equivalent to a blood alcohol level of 0.08. And that's, I believe, over the legal driving limit, right? So you can imagine how it builds up over time. Day after day, not sleeping can just make so many cognitive issues, and your alertness is off, your concentration, your judgment, dealing with complex or logical thinking is just slaughtered. But you have to think about how you're going to change sleep, right? And what's going to be the right amount of sleep for you. Experts say that adults 18 years old and older need between 7.5 and 8.5 hours of sleep in a 24-hour period. But sleep quality often deteriorates as we age, and it's not like there's some special number that maybe is going to be right for everybody. But researchers at UC Berkeley, they linked poor sleep with memory loss, and one thing they discovered was that while you're sleeping, brain waves transfer your memories from the hippocampus to the prefrontal cortex, what a great word, where memories are stored for longer. But if you are not able to enter deep sleep, or your deep sleep is interrupted, this is going to impair your memory storage. So if you have problems getting to sleep and then staying asleep, or you have daytime sleepiness, definitely get this checked out. See a sleep specialist for possible causes so you can start getting the rest that you need, and do whatever it takes to get better sleep. I mean, we're doing that now, and it's a mission of Godspeed, and it's a lot of challenges, but at the end of the day, you got to take action, because I've noticed really, really bad consequences from not being able to get enough sleep. It's very, very, very troubling, and so many people, they would have extraordinary memory boosts if they just would attend to sleep. Number 5, won't surprise you that research shows heavy alcohol consumption impairs or damages memory. And heavy alcohol consumption, daily drinking, just slaughters your mind. Now, I've never been so super heavy as a drinker, but I did have a period, especially when I lived in Germany, where I became quite a lush. And I know what it's like to lose parts of time, and it's not that good, but even small and moderate ranges of alcohol can cause memory issues as well. I actually stopped drinking for a number of years and was amazed by how much more mental clarity and memory I had. And these days, just for a little bit of digestion help, I have the odd glass of wine, and I don't really see a negative impact from that. But the whole thing is that it even could have an impact. Just, I'm not in the scientific study to figure that out. The point is that in order for memories to be formed, to be saved, our brain leverages a communication system between the neurons in the hippocampus. So very simply put, this communication system is slowed by alcohol and often derailed by alcohol, which is why you get short-term memory losses after a night of partying. You've literally interrupted that system. And then you have long-term memory losses that are bigger and bigger the heavier the alcohol consumption is. And you can even cause permanent, irreversible damage to the nerve cells in the hippocampus. And you also have possible thiamine deficiencies that can be caused by alcohol consumption. That can lead to dementia. It can lead to even worse things, Alzheimer's. And you have this progressive, permanent loss of memory that's never coming back. The U.S. Center for Disease Control's recommendation calls for moderate alcohol consumption for those who drink, limited to 1 drink for women and 2 drinks for men. And that's basically, not to be considered a daily average. It's more like once a week, and I do much less than that myself. So if you're noticing memory loss and you consume alcohol, consider cutting back on it or avoiding it altogether. Be aware that your brain is more sensitive to the effects of alcohol than you may think. And as we age, it gets more and more sensitive still. Now, the next thing, number 6, is to stop smoking, to stop vaping. One of the most negative effects that you can do to yourself is smoking, and it's got an impact on the lungs, the heart, and your memory. And not only that, but you are basically cursing people around you by reducing their oxygen supply and damaging their blood vessels. And exposing them to over 50 toxic chemicals, contributing to their cognitive issues and their memory loss. So, not to put too hard a tone on it, but it's a crime against humanity. Now, nicotine has its uses in certain ways, but through cigarettes, electronic cigarettes, etc., it's highly addictive. And it's a stimulant that affects your concentration, your learning, and your memory, but not in good ways. So when you quit smoking, you're quite likely to increase your memory quite quickly. And it's well known that smoking is difficult. So there's help out there. Talk to doctors. Go to addiction experts. Find ways to break that addiction because your memory is going to thank you for it. Now, 7 is related to alcohol and smoking, and that's just overall avoidance of substance abuse. Chronic use of drugs leads to difficulty in concentration. Why? Because you're jonesing for what it is that you are addicted to. And you need concentration for learning and remembering. You can't have this super hyper focused on how you're going to get a fix, right? It's going to harm so many parts of your brain. But even when you are on the high with many substances, you're already thinking about the next one and the next one and the next one. So this is a problem for thinking, for problem solving. And, the studies on long and short-term ecstasy, for example, as a recreational drug use, these people had some pretty severe memory impairments, even if they felt more love for their fellow man. So the ability to organize, to plan, and multitask also in these ecstasy studies went way, way down. So if you're using drugs recreationally, consider removing them. You can get help and support from friends and family. Your memory will thank you. Not only that, but your behavior will probably create better memories in your friends and family, and they'll just like you a lot more. The 8th tip is a challenge for sure. I find it challenging, but it's really, really important, and that's to balance stress. Stress-induced memory loss is terrible, and it happens very, very frequently to a lot of people. Highly stressful circumstances, they can form unforgettable memories. Like, for example, you'll never forget being robbed at gunpoint. Someone tried to mug me when I lived in Manhattan. That is a flashbulb memory if ever there was one. Thankfully, I studied the Russian martial arts systema, so I got out of it with my wallet intact and I didn't get shot. But still, the stress of that moment is massive in my mind. But if I was trying to study for a test while that was happening, well, the adrenaline just battles against our attempts to remember things. And I had another really emotionally disturbing situation, speaking of tests, when I was living in Manhattan. I had to fly to Toronto for one of my field exams as part of my PhD. And we had a situation where the plane was landing in Pearson Airport and suddenly it yanked back up and we were going around and we were quite close to the CN Tower, or so it looked out the window. And everybody's like, what is going on? And, there was just that one stewardess on this small little plane, and she was on the seat at the back of the pilot's door, and she said, if the pilot wants to tell me something, he'll tell me something, when everybody was looking at her for an explanation. That was so spooky. And then the next day, I had to go and sit for this exam, and I was still stressed out, had anxiety from it, and I had difficulty focusing and concentrating during that exam. Thankfully, I have the magnetic memory method, so I was able to get through anyway, but not without some struggle. And there's a Berkeley study that shows that chronic stress, anxiety over time changes the brain and interrupts the normal ways that you communicate, the normal ways that you process memory. But fortunately, stress and other emotional disturbances can be managed and you can heal your brain. There really is a way to restore damage to the brain. It's called neuroplasticity, and you just have to do the right techniques in order to get yourself back into action. And we've talked about some of them already. You can stop smoking, stop drinking, get better sleep, and so on. And we'll go further into some things that you can do to heal your brain. And, walking backwards is one of those neurological activities that you can do, neurobics. There's many, many neurobics, so it's possible. And if you're concerned about stress or depression, anxiety as a cause for your memory loss, as always, consult your doctor, but try to just reduce feeling stressed, because stress is a sensory experience. And, I always look for ways to remove my stress because I'm a pretty high-strung individual. Even though I meditate a lot and all that sort of stuff, I have to really work at relaxation. And every day I sit and I meditate, and I do various things that I share with you all the time with the Magnetic Memory Method mission. And by the way, if you're new here, get subscribed. If you like material like this that goes in depth and strings together multiple tips, hit that thumbs up for the love of memory, and explore the channel because there's a lot that I've shared about how I combat my high-strung nature. And, some days are better than others. But at the end of the day, stress-induced memory loss is a real thing. And if you are finding that you just don't quite remember things, look at your stress, see what you can do to reduce it. And Qigong, I do pretty much every morning. That's been huge. And that walking backwards activity I had mentioned before, very, very powerful. And it reduces stress. Even though you would think, isn't walking backwards stress-inducing? And it really isn't, because I make sure that I'm really, really safe. And I do it in the outdoor gym where there's a path where I can see where I'm going, and I check that no one's coming, etc. But that is a good point. Whatever exercise you do, try to make sure that you're doing it in careful, safe environments where you're not actually creating stress. And I don't know actually if, climbing a mountain face without ropes would reduce your stress or increase it or not, but just generally consider, are you doing risky things in your sports that may be creating stress that is having a counteractive effect against what normally physical activities would do to help improve your memory? Number 9 is that you got to support your memory with the right foods. Now, what are the right foods? Well, first, we can think about it this way. Stop poisoning your brain. I'm serious. The foods you eat have this hugely tremendous impact on your brain health, your memory. Your brain function is impacted very, very negatively by eating foods that cause inflammation, that contain toxic chemicals. And all you have to do to strengthen your memory is discontinue foods that weaken your brain. And then you can help heal things faster by adding foods that are good for your memory. Now, I don't want to get too much into this or that food because it's going to be unique to each individual. Sure, there's some generally considered good for memory foods like walnuts, but I can't eat walnuts. I have a very, very bad reaction to nuts of just about any kind, right? So definitely look into that. And speaking of stress, nuts cause me a lot of stress, right? So I had to work for a very long time to figure out a diet that I can actually do without having horrible skin problems, without having increased stress, and in a way that supports the production of brain chemicals like we've talked about already, BDNF. And, there's many, many ways that you can get great protein that's going to help your blood flow to your brain better. But how you know exactly how to eat is by investigating on your own, testing, ideally with some sort of support. And, there's just some obvious ones like flavonoid-filled fruits and vegetables, etc. But you may be in a situation like me where I can't get that many flavonoids from fruits and vegetables because of a condition that I have. And so I talk about in The Victorious Mind all of the different food journaling activities I've done to get to the core of things, rotation diets, elimination diets, etc. But nonetheless, you've got to really work it out for yourself and be careful about recommendations. I've done some carnivore diet recommendations, for example, that started out really nicely, but wound up quite bad in the end. And sometimes people want to battle me about it and say, oh, you just didn't do the carnivore diet correctly and so forth. I beg to differ, but anyway, look for the kinds of foods that are going to work for you by testing and working with a doctor and trying to get inflammation reduced and blood flow increased to the brain through your diet. There's a 10-year study of seniors that suggested high dietary flavonoid consumption is quite possibly associated with better cognitive performance. There's another study that focused very, very specifically on fruit flavonoids, and they found that some of these seem to protect brain neurons from toxins, from inflammatory-based injuries, right? You can literally injure your brain from what you eat. And so, apples, berries, citrus, these can limit or even reverse age-related memory deterioration. But scientists are still working on zeroing in on exactly what the recommended amounts of these substances are to fight brain-related diseases and conditions. But in the meantime, really just don't overlook the fact that what works for me may not work for thee, right? And vice versa. So, this idea of just have a lot of color in your diet and so forth doesn't work for me. Now, we got to go a little bit further with this food issue because reducing sugar is really, really important. Although elevated glucose levels are harmful to the entire body, it's really bad for memory function, especially concentration and attention. They're so negatively impacted by the inflammatory effects of excess sugar. There's a really interesting study of a split test between highly trained rats and the ones that wound up with a lot of sugar. Their training might as well never have happened. They got so bad as a result of taking in all these foods with really bad carbohydrates, trans fats, etc. So people do this to themselves all the time. Vegetable oils, processed meats. They're just filling themselves with inflammation, which adversely affects memory. So one of the things to consider is choline. It's found in eggs. It's found in beef liver, soybeans, potatoes, etc. And this supports the development of your brain and the ranges for choline in adults. You really got to know your BMI and check with doctors, check the label, all of that sort of stuff. And, just consider a hard-boiled egg. It has 147 milligrams of choline, which is about 1/4 of the daily recommended that you need. So I tend to eat 3 to 4 eggs every morning, and I feel great. I love eggs. I never get tired of eggs. It's really, really a powerful way to get choline. And try to just get rid of foods that have additives. There's words that I can barely pronounce, and they're very, very difficult to pronounce. And that's kind of like a clue, right? I mean, half of the dietary problems that we have is eating foods that we can't even pronounce, let alone memorize. Like you'd literally have to use memory palaces and really focus on those words because they're so complicated. Anyway, there's a whole lot of things we could say. There's a lot of buzz about vitamins and supplements that are supposedly going to promote your brain health and enhance your memory. And some of these claims may be legitimate for you relative to all the other factors in your diet, but others of them can lead you into Parkinson's disease, Alzheimer's disease, etc. And in my own research, which is indeed my own research, I found that there's a so-called memory expert who offers supplements, and those supplements at best give you like a 0.05 verbal memory advantage, which is the exact same advantage you could get from drinking 1 glass of water. So there's a lot of spooky claims out there. My advice is carpe diem, seize the day, but always, always, always caveat emptor, buyer beware. The 10th strategy for you is to schedule that checkup. Go see your doctor to help manage any chronic conditions like high blood pressure, diabetes, anxiety, depression, obesity. And some memory problems can be solved very simply. You get a blood test, you find out that you have hypothyroidism, and you get that fixed and your memory comes back. There are some real manageable solutions for things that impact short-term and long-term memory. But if you aren't regularly getting your physical and your mental health checked out, a review of any medications that you're taking, well, then you might not ever think that those things are the source of your memory challenges. Another good thing to be checking with doctors about is hearing loss. So, I give these name demonstrations, and I'm usually really, really accurate, but from an injury I had since I was a kid, I have 80% hearing loss, directional hearing loss specifically in my left ear. So I can't hear things, and I have to wonder sometimes if I forget things. Is it not just because that I didn't hear them at all, but maybe I misheard them, and then that's why I remember things differently than so many other people do. So hearing loss is a big thing, because if you don't hear it correctly or you don't hear it at all, how are you going to remember it? Same thing with vision. Sometimes people ask me about speed reading and so forth. Well, speed reading actually does things to your vision that may cause you to misread things. But so would having poor vision that isn't properly addressed with glasses or whatever you need to correct your vision, right? So look into this, because when it comes to hearing loss, people who have hearing loss and don't get it checked out, it can lead to later cognitive impairment compared to people who just have normal hearing. And there's lots of problems with your eyes, so that if you don't get it checked out, you won't know about diabetes or other conditions. So regular checkups are super, super important. Your overall health is a pathway to improving your cognitive function. And so forgetfulness, if that's a concern, one of the number one things that you can do is get thee to your doctor, full physical, discuss your symptoms, and make sure that you do it regularly. Tip 11, pump some gray matter. I'm talking about brain exercises. To maintain a good mind, you need to have specific exercises that are going to really, really help move things around upstairs, right? So I'm talking about visualization. Even if you can't visualize, you can visualize. I have on my YouTube channel exercises for people to visualize even though they can't visualize. So they're for people with aphantasia. And, some people with aphantasia say, oh, it still doesn't work for me. And I try my best to help all people, but I can't necessarily get through to everyone. But if you have that issue, make sure to check those out. The image streaming video has been gone through many, many times by many people. There's really interesting discussions there, and it probably will help you too. But it'll also give you brain exercise, even if you can't visualize. And there's many, many exercises that I've put on the channel. All of them are sourced out of science, and I think you'll really, really enjoy them. But that's one of the keys, right? When you go into brain exercise, choose activities that you actually enjoy, that you like, but don't like them too much. So there's a kind of a contradiction there, right? If you're not challenged, if you're always in your comfort zone, then you're probably not getting any brain exercise, right? So what's a way to get challenged in a way that you enjoy? Well, I like to play games with cards. We're just basically dual and back games where you flip over a 3 of spades and then you flip it back over, and then later when you find the 3 of clubs, where was that 3 of spades? That's very, very challenging for memory, right? And it can be done just on the floor or on your bed, etc. I love that game so much. And you don't even have to do it with playing cards. There's different sets that I have that you can wonderfully just play with graffiti and just interesting art that people have come up with. So cards, I like to play solitaire with an actual physical deck. Also, I learn new magic tricks. That's a form of brain exercise. And it really helps because essentially they're mathematical problems with a deck of cards. Sounds kind of weird to think about it that way, but that's what magic tricks are. They are solving mathematical problems with a deck of cards to create an illusion or an effect that ultimately gets you in more conversations with more people because you have something to talk about this cool little routine that you've put together. You have to remember the routine itself in addition to the words that you're going to say, or what magicians call patter. And it's just wonderful, wonderful. So definitely make studying magic part of your brain exercise. You can do magic with coins, magic with cards, the cups and balls. Oh man, that was one of my favorite things to perform when I was giving regular magic shows. The point is get out of the echo chamber, get off the apps, stay away from brain exercise apps. I strongly believe that that's one of the worst things you can do because you're exposing yourself to digital amnesia, right? Another great brain exercise is to, and I'm a little biased here because I have a PhD, but read philosophy. Even if philosophy is not your bag, it is such a huge, tremendous brain exercise, and it will do wonders for your critical thinking abilities. And you can't even imagine, if you're not already into the habit of asking philosophical questions, what it will do for your brain. Anyway, there's lots and lots of brain exercises that I have created based on the science that are not doing philosophy. The book, The Memory Advantage, has 52, one for every week. So I open that up every once in a while. If you are interested in getting that, make sure that you are subscribed so that you get notifications, not just on YouTube or not just on the podcast catchers, but over at Magnetic Memory Method, the home website, because man, do we ever have adventures. The 12th strategy for you is to have an open mind. So you can open your mind in many, many different ways, one of which is just to choose. I'm going to have an open mind from now on. Some people are very skeptical about the memory techniques that I teach, And I think that's very good. I was skeptical of them too, but a true skeptic actually has an open mind and tries them. You try to prove them wrong by actually doing them, and most people can't. If you really follow the instructions, then you're going to have some kind of effect. It's very difficult not to. So that's one way to keep your mind open, is just to decide to have an open mind, to be a true skeptic, as I like to think of it. But then there's meditation, there's yoga, and the improved memory that you see in study after study after study. I think it comes from the improved ability to focus, to pay attention, because you're practicing attention and focus when you do yoga and meditation routines. And, very simplistically, I think the difference between meditation and yoga is that yoga combines physical movement with mindfulness, while meditation is typically practiced while sitting still. Now, when I practice meditation for mindfulness, I really get an extra boost of concentration because I recite 17 words of Sanskrit that I memorized for meditation purposes. And the cognitive benefits of this are just huge because it reduces stress and anxiety, specifically because of the content that I memorized, which helps remind me to not take things so seriously. I mean, literally, one of the lines that I memorized in Sanskrit is that a real thought is as rare as a rabbit with horns. And when I can just remind myself of that, my thoughts going crazy and so forth, I just laugh and laugh and laugh. Anyway, there's many, many things to say about meditation, but it is very, very important to get into some kind of practice, either physical, mindful yoga practice or meditation, in order to really start to develop a ability to observe what's happening in your mind, and then you have a greater ability to influence it and make it calmer. And so if you need more help with that, read The Victorious Mind, because I go into lots and lots of exercises that are fun and simple, and I also introduce you to ones that aren't so simple, but are also still really fun. The 13th strategy is one of the easiest and hardest things to do. It used to be much easier, but now it's getting very, very challenging because a lot of people are looking at computers while you're with them. And that tip is to socialize. There's a study that I read at the University of Michigan that discovered a correlation between a higher amount of social interaction and cognitive function levels in people of all age groups. And they even concluded that just 10 minutes in conversation can boost your intellectual performance. But what kind of conversation? One that's interrupted by notifications? No. You have to be with the people, and you need to really, really share the moments with them in order to get that benefit. So in order to find opportunities, just fill your social calendar. Leave the machines at home. Visit an art gallery with a friend. Volunteer for a local cause. Start your own group, Find a hobby that you are interested in or resurrect an older one. Take a class. Be around people. Talk to them. Socializing is a huge way to keep your memory sharp. And also you can socialize with yourself in a weird way. This is tip number 14, which has to do with keeping a reflective journal. So if you want to remember more about your life and basically exercise your memory and improve it overall, write in a journal. I write in journals every single day, more than one journal. And you can journal about your day, what you did, the kinds of emotional experiences you had, etc. You can even journal about your dreams. The whole point is to keep your thoughts in a daily journal. It has so many benefits, and it exercises your working memory as you do it because you're processing thoughts, you're gaining more focus. Quite likely you're reducing stress because you get an objective view about things. And you're also going to forget less, or at least you'll have a record to check, which is going to reduce stress overall. And when you check what you've written in the past, this can be a great way to boost your explicit memory, right? Because you have much, much better long-term memory that you develop through writing of facts and events in your life. But when you do check things, you're really tapping into those memories again and strengthening them over and over and over again. And so a really easy way to start is just to simply dedicate a notebook for your journal. And if you want, you can make video journals or you can audio journal with phones very, very easily. But I recommend you get some digital fasting in and write at least one unfiltered observation per day in prose. It is going to be absolutely fundamentally, amazingly life-transforming for you. It will make your memory magnetic. Speaking of magnetic memory, the 15th tip I have for you is to start memorizing numbers using the major method. Now this gets into brain exercise territory because it's going to take a little bit of stretching to learn the major system, but let's face it, numbers are tough to remember, and they're even harder to recall by themselves. Why? Because the brain will naturally tend to deprecate information that has no particular context or isn't being used all that often. So take, for example, your parking spot at the shopping mall. You might say to yourself over and over and over again, B4, B4, B4. But the problem is that your brain needs more help than just repetition with parking spaces. And it needs it with phone numbers, dates, other numerical data, because it's not like words. It's just sort of abstract and floaty, right? So what you can do is learn the major method, and it uses the association of consonants and the sounds of those consonants with the digits 0 to 9. And then to remember numbers, you can form words that are associated to sounds to help you remember as many digits as you want. And you can take the number memorization techniques to very, very, very advanced levels, such as the PAO system, which I have taught in some detail in the magnetic memory method world. It's very, very powerful. Get into it. It will give you the brain exercise that you need. And then anytime you see a number, rather than, thinking B4, B4 for your parking spot, you'll have a very, very special sound that you can mix with the alphabetical letter of the parking spot and just amazingly and happily find your way back every single time. And then when people give you numbers, you'll be able to remember those. Prices of things, you'll be able to remember those. Whatever the numbers are in your life, you can memorize them. Number 16, do some mind mapping. The technique of mind mapping was hugely popularized by Tony Buzan before he died. I knew him. He was amazing. He helped inspire so many people to develop creative thinking, to exercise their memory by using their hands. And this visual tool of mind mapping combines words with images, numbers with images and shapes on pages, and they can help you correlate concepts in your mind. They enhance learning in so many different ways. And you can unlock this vast reservoir of your potential by getting what it is you want to achieve in life out of your mind and onto paper into images. And Tony Buzan, he called it radiant thinking. And I think that's really quite true. It just gives a shininess to your ideas. And it improves your memory and your focus by leveraging using your hand and getting colors that open up different parts of your brain, shapes and words that you place in different ways that open up your imagination. And the best part is that if you design your mind maps in particular ways that I teach, and I'll share resources with you, and I have already, about how to use mind maps as memory palaces, it is astonishing how much you can remember from just simple mind maps. I used mind maps a lot to help me pass level 3 in Mandarin, and it is a glorious, glorious technique. So my number one tip for you in section 16 here is to mind map, explore it. Spend at least 3 months, 90 days, totally focused on learning everything you can about mind mapping strategies. I have a lot of takes on it, but there are many other people who have wonderful, wonderful takes on it, like Phil Chambers. Whoa, amazing stuff. So devote yourself to mind mapping. You won't regret it, and your memory will love you for it. So let me just talk as my 17th tip a little bit more as a nice thing for you about the magnetic mind map. And basically, it's really quite simple. What I do is I use a clock-like structure, and I start at the 12 o'clock position with the first thing I want to mind map. So first, actually, you start with a central image, and then the sub-point starts at 12 o'clock. And then everything related to that central image goes in a clockwise structure, and then I can memorize it by using that clockwise structure as a memory palace journey. We'll talk more about memory palaces in a minute, but at the end of the day, if you look at this mind map that's on the screen, when I was learning German, I needed to learn a bunch of words related to kitchens and cooking and so forth. And I also use the major system when I do this. So I mentioned the major system, and basically when you have a sound for every number, you can then make words. So at 12 o'clock, I tend to use tin tin. And so whatever it is that I'm memorizing in the 12 o'clock position, I relate to the comic book character Tin Tin. Now 13 has the sound damn, because 1 can be a D or T sound, and 3 will be an M sound. Now 13 is 1300 hours, in case you don't use the 24-hour clock. You could do it a different way if you want, but that's the way that I do it. So 12 o'clock makes a tin sound, because 1 is T, 2 is N. Then 1300 hours makes a damn sound, because I use the D and then in the M. But I don't think of damn as swearing. I think of the Hoover Dam. So then we go to 2 o'clock, and then we have 1400 hours. So we have 1 and 4. And so T or D and then an R sound. So I have tire, which is the Michelin Tire Man. Anyway, whatever that information is that I'm placing in that location, I weave it together with an association. So if I'm memorizing something at the 2 o'clock position, let's just say it's something simple, like I'm memorizing the name John. Well, then I will have the Michelin Tire Man throwing tires and wrapping them around John, right? And it's just really, really amazing. Now, this is quite a simple application, and I don't tend to use it for anything super complex except for the Chinese example. But that is a kind of a different strategy than what I'm talking about right now. That's in the Magnetic Memory Method Masterclass FAQ section if you're interested. But the whole point is that by practicing this very simple approach to mind mapping, the magnetic mind map, you'll be able to quickly encode into long-term memory and recall small sets of related facts very, very quickly, and it's so much fun to use. Okay, the 18th tip that I have for you is the ultimate go with what you know memory technique. It's the Memory Palace technique, and it leverages your personal inner cognitive maps, your conceptual representations of familiar locations like your home or your neighborhood. And as you mentally travel through these familiar locations, just like we just talked about in the mind map strategy, you place associations on special areas. So if we wanted to remember John, let's say, we would place him, say, behind me here in a memory palace. And as I walk around, I could remember the opening of the book of John in Latin, which is, if memory serves, in principio erat verbum, right? And so all I'm going to do in the memory palace, and this is why this is a little bit more robust than having mind map memory palaces, is I can use a lot of space, and I can have an image for in principio erat verbum. Now, the cool thing is when you have these number systems like the major, like erat, well, I just told you that 4 is an R sound, right, in the Michelin Tire Man. Well, now we have rat, which would be 41, and 41, my image is splinter. So when I memorized that word, in principio erat verbum, I was like, what am I going to use for that image? And then I thought, well, I'm going to use my number 41 image, which is splinter. So my memory palaces are filled with all kinds of wonderful images, many of which are derived from the number system. Now, there's a lot to say about memory palaces. There's different names for them: memory palace, mind palace, Roman room, method of loci. Oh, some people call it a memory castle. You call it whatever you like. I like to call it memory palace, and I like to think of the images that we place inside of memory palaces like splinter to help me remember the Latin word erat. I like to think of it as magnetic imagery because it sticks in place. But also, while I'm using the magnetic memory method, it helps to push away distractions because it's so fun. It's like a video game in your mind, and you just go from station to station, building your own treasure-filled kingdom of amazing facts, foreign language phrases, and individual vocabulary words, and the important numbers you need to remember. But here's the issue. When it comes to self-care and upgrading your health status, well, I think that the Memory Palace technique, as good as it is going to be so much better when you take the time to establish physical health. Why do I know? Because I drank way too much when I was in university. I used memory techniques and I still got a boost, but it's been so much better since I worked on all the things that we've talked about today. So try to avoid the need for instant gratification when you get into all of the recommendations today. Become mindful, but don't have an all or nothing attitude. Healthful, deep-rooted changes take time to work and start to work in the background of your life, and you won't always feel it in the foreground, because sometimes this real deep work needs to take place. And I know that people want quick wins, and there are quick wins in memory. For example, I used to teach people to memorize the alphabet backwards, and many of them can get it in about 11 minutes or so, or at least enough of the alphabet where they get the concept. You can do that now too. Create a very simple memory palace. Start at the back of your home and move out towards an exit, so you have plenty of magnetic stations, little places like this where we have a rat, and you can do one for every letter of the alphabet, 26 in total. You can start with half the alphabet or the first 4 letters as you please. Sometimes people get overwhelmed by a large amount, and that's fine. Just break it down to the smallest component, but challenge yourself. Make it at least 4, because you could use the 4 corners in a room or the 4 walls, or make it 8, 4 corners and 4 walls. At the end of the day, what you're going to do is on your first station, you're going to think, okay, so the alphabet backwards, it starts with Z. So Z, Y, X, W, V, U, T. And then, basically what I had was a zebra with a yellow xylophone asking what for W to a man named Vut, who's a senior, and on and on and on. So that gives you Z, Y, X, W, V, U, T, S, R. And then that senior has a question for a post office box. Is that right? Z, Y, X, W, V, U, T, S, R, Q, P-O for post office box. It's wonderful. It's wonderful. It's a great little exercise. But is it relevant to you? Do you need to be able to memorize the alphabet backwards and recite it at any time? I don't know. Find the information that would change your life if you could remember it by this time tomorrow, and you will have so much more success. Your brain will light up with excitement because suddenly you remember that information that has been evading you forever, and now you can save time because you're not always looking it up over and over and over again. You're just using it directly from your mind. We want to explore memory improvement from the basis of a very, very specific goal. And I mentioned, I get to my coaching clients with this question and push them a little bit. What is the thing that you need to memorize for very, very specific memory improvement goals? Because there's specific things that you can work on and memorize that will address both short-term and long-term memory at the same time. So if you want to improve short-term memory very, very specifically, well, there's a disheartening fact about short-term memory, and that's that it's not just limited, right? It's connected to all the other levels of your memory. So you may as well work all the other levels of your memory, because having better long-term memory will deal with the limited capacity of short-term memory and make the data that you put there stronger, so that it's not just in and out, right? You'll have more time, more processing time. As the data flows in and you're using memory techniques, you won't have to rely that much on short-term memory because your long-term memory is going to come rushing in. It's like when I was memorizing that opening of the book of John, in principio erat verum. I was juggling that around, trying to figure out, how am I going to memorize this complicated Latin or whatever? But my long-term memory provided me with the image of Splinter, because that word is there, rat, and he's a rat, right? So the desire to improve short-term memory and focus on it, I don't think it's such a great idea for most of us, right? We want to work on all the levels of memory so that when we give ourselves new information that comes into short-term memory and is dealt with in working memory, your brain doesn't have to work nearly as much. It doesn't have to stage the information for so long to process it, because you have these elaborative tools that you use because you've trained yourself with something like the magnetic memory method. The magnetic memory method is literally consciously trying to improve the entire staging process. So when we want to be more efficient, we have to be more conscious of the nature of the information and what we're going to do with it. And that's what memory techniques are all about. They help us leverage our innate ability to make combinations. We know where our fridge is, right? We're biologically wired to remember space. And so that's what the memory palace technique is and why it's so important. We're able to just think, okay, so I can remember this space, and now I can take all of these images and basically program my brain to remember vast amounts of information. Wow. Why don't I train to do that, both long-term and short-term memory, so everything gets better all around? Your brain is so especially good at remembering locations, it's not even funny. It's not just about spatial memory, it's also visual memory, because you can tend to remember how things look, like how your fridge looks, right? And even people who are not sighted, they still can use the memory palace technique. And another part of the way that the memory techniques work is you just get practice with chunking, it's called, the chunking memory strategy. You're breaking information down into packets. And to give you just a very simple example, in principio, right? So, I often use Prince for the sounds PR or PRIN in this case. And to remember it, I think of him with, what's that actor's name? DiCaprio, right? So in principio, and he's literally in DiCaprio's house. And it's just very, very simple to think about that. Now, because it's Latin, that makes me think of Shakespeare. And so I think of one place where I saw Romeo and Juliet, the play, and that now becomes the memory palace in this particular case. And so we have in principio, right? And we're using spatial memory. We're using all kinds of autobiographical memory because of remembering that I saw this play, using wonderful levels of sound memory by mixing things together, auditory memory and the visual memory that gets exercised because I'm thinking of people like Prince and Leonardo DiCaprio. And so it's not really, I don't know. I mean, memory scientists want to get rid of the word memory because it's insufficient to the cause of describing what's going on. But when it comes to ushering information from short-term memory into long-term memory very, very quickly, you do it by harnessing what's already in long-term memory, but breaking down the new information that you don't know into the smallest possible components. I call this the principle of word division in the Magnetic Memory Method Masterclass, and it's a holistic approach to improving all aspects of your memory. So I would love if you would check out the Magnetic Memory Method Masterclass. It's going to challenge you to build your memory and develop brain exercise habits. And it has in it a course about food called Memory Destroying Foods and What to Eat Instead that I think will really, really help build your understanding of how you can work out a better diet for yourself and just generally get into higher levels of self-care that will contribute to improved memory throughout your life. So I would suggest that you just get started by going to Magnetic Memory Method, my website, search it up, and you will find information about the full Magnetic Memory Method Masterclass, as well as dozens and dozens of articles all about the work that I do and many, many tips like you've encountered today. So before we go, let's talk a little bit more about the miracle of long-term memory. It's the ultimate technique, I believe, to leverage your brain's innate wiring. And the quality and the strength of long-term memories can be enhanced by really focusing on elaborate encoding. So I've already talked about things like using Prince and Leonardo DiCaprio. These are deeply interwoven in my brain. You might not know who they are, but you could think of who else you might think of for sounds like in principio, right? But the point is I don't stop there. I gave you the basic example of breaking things down through the chunking memory strategy, but then I weave things together so that it gets even deeper into long-term memory by making those associations very, very striking. And to make it as striking as possible, I use multi-sensory magnetic modes, they're called, and they're kinesthetic feelings that help make the image more interesting and sometimes a little bit extreme, very, very strong. So I would imagine Prince in a fight with Leonardo DiCaprio, but I would have them doing it at the beginning of time because in principio means in the beginning. And I would really imagine the feeling of how strange it must be to physically fight someone at the beginning of time, a sense of wonder. And there would be sounds of the scuffle. There would be some sense of what it looks like, which I already have because I know what Prince looks like. I know what Leonardo DiCaprio looks like. And you want to do this too. Just think of what these people look like. And then you add emotions. You add different pieces of information. Like, what's the concept here? Well, the concept is it's a Shakespeare play that has now been changed in a weird way to be taking place at the beginning of time, right? And these sensations these points of logic, these concepts, are becoming a new story that's taking place very specifically in a location that is remembered. And this is going to make long-term recall easier. Why? Because you have a place to refer to. You're going to the memory palace and you're referring to images that have been in your memory already for a long time. And then to make the binding together with the new information last as long as possible, you're elaborating it. And you're elaborating it also from information that is in your long-term memory. You know what it feels like, probably, to scuffle with someone. We've all had some kind of, even if it's just play fighting with a pet or play fighting with a sibling. We know what that's like. We know what it feels like to roll around on the ground, right? So you're tapping into all of these multisensory associations. And it is powerful, especially when you do it regularly, and it'll give you that brain exercise. And it's going to be even better when you take care of every part of your physical life. So if you want to know more about using the memory palace for experiencing long-term memory, there's so many little missions you can make for yourself. Memorize the names of people you're interested in. Memorize Latin phrases. Memorize numbers. Whatever it is you choose to do, just try and think again, what is it that I could have in my memory that would make my life better 24 hours from now if I had it at my fingertips, the tip of my tongue? Very, very powerful indeed. And if you want to know more about the Memory Palace technique and you're watching on YouTube, stick around and watch the Memory Palace technique for studying next. Now, you might not be studying right now, but the reality is that we're always studying what it is we want to memorize. And this will give you more information on how you can create memory palaces that are robust, fun to use, and tap deeply into what's already in your long-term memory. Because again, at the end of the day, it is about short-term memory, it is about working memory, but you want to harness that deep, 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 super powerful ocean of long-term memory. That's what the Memory Palace technique is all about. Thank you so much for joining me for this mega tutorial. Hit that thumbs up if you haven't already. Get subscribed if you're new here and you want more material like this, notifications so you don't miss a thing. And again, check out the Memory Palace technique for studying next.